Hello, everyone. My name is Shwan, and today we're doing another podcast. Today we have Stu. Um, he's a track and field coach from the UK, renowned for his great knowledge of track and field, expertise, and obviously also lifting as well. So yeah, introduce yourself, Stu, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem at all. Hi, so I am Stu. You can call me Stu Marshall, actually. Yeah,
Yes,
I'm a
yes.
coach in the UK. Primarily focus around 400. I'm obsessed with the 400 meters,
Hmm.
literally obsessed with the 400 meters. But obviously, I do have athletes over 100 and 200. I've been coaching
Mhm.
now actually since about 2008, 2009
Okay.
is when I first started assisting our old coach then with a few athletes, and one of those athletes is currently competing at the Winter Olympics actually in
Oh,
the
Oh,
bobsled.
nice.
Um,
Oh, Bob's
yeah,
okay.
yeah. So I've been coaching and helping out for quite a while, and then obviously went into my own way coaching ever since then, and various levels of athletes and things like that. So, and including myself, I still train. Actually, I still try and compete, or say
Mm.
try, but I definitely try and keep fit and things like that as well. So yeah.
Yes, yes, nice, nice. Um, so you
um,
when did you start becoming like a main coach? Because you said you first started out as an assistant coach.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a hard one in reality. So I guess very early on in my own personal athletic career, it was the usual case, right? You get injured all the time, so you start trying to learn why you're getting injured and why you're trying to what you can do to improve yourself away from the track when you're there, just 2 hours here and there type scenario. So I started coaching, assisting my old coach with a few athletes, and then did start coaching by myself in probably 2012. Yeah, yeah, probably 2012. The Olympic year. That's not true actually. It was 2011. I do now remember. It was the 2011 summer going into what would then be over the winter into 2012. That's when I had my first couple of athletes that did reasonably well. I had um, an athlete who immediately then went into the university champs and got a silver in the 200. And in fact, she still competes. She competes as a para athlete now, and she's a multiple gold winner. So unfortunately, she wasn't a multiple
Nice.
gold winner with me, but as you can tell, a few athletes who I've worked with have gone to some good success since then.
Mm.
And then I was coaching myself for a few years with with the normal club, with the local athletics club, and then I guess I
Mhm.
took it a little bit more serious from about 2016, 2017. It's when I started to get a bit more serious and actually, I was very, very lucky. I had a couple of athletes. So I had an athlete who had since like 13 years old, um, and I'd coached him through his teenage years. So obviously he was maturing and trying to balance that out, what you're trying to do with an athlete who's going through those age group kind of stuff. And he was running pretty quick actually. He managed to get to 21.1, which in the UK is very, very good. Uh,
Mm.
and then I had a girl come to the university, come to Warwick University. She was a 400-meter athlete. She was running about, I think it was high 55. And I remember thinking, we did a few sessions and got a few months into the work, and I wasn't quite sure if she was going to be any good. But then we started to click a little bit together, and she started to improve. And I thought, you know what, actually, I need to do a little bit better as a coach as well. So we then
Mm.
started working together more, and I took it a bit more serious.
Yes.
so, um, you were an athlete, and then you primarily ran the 400, right? Or like, long sprints. It
Yeah,
sounds like.
absolutely.
Okay.
I didn't care for the ones and twos personally. No,
Really?
that's not entirely true. Well, do you know what? It was one of those things where I was younger,
Hmm.
and it was a friend of mine who needed some help. He was in like high school. We were like high school kids. It's like our last
Secondary.
year of high school. Yeah, secondary school.
Secondary. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Secondary in the UK. My school was
16.
actually yeah, my school was a high school. But yeah, it was
Oh.
16. Yeah, yeah. Believe it or not, it was weird. It was just named a high school for whatever reason in the UK.
Yeah.
It isn't standard. But yeah, so I remember doing that, and I was primarily like the fastest kid in school, right? So I was always really quick and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it was always kind of like a little bit given. So it was like, okay, you're quick, therefore we don't need to do anything too much. And then a friend of mine wanted some help training for the 400, and I had no idea what to do. So I went to the library, hired a book, read it, and I think it was a book on some Italian training back in the day. And then we started training together, and I was like, oh my days, I absolutely love this. And then just started to think about 400 a bit differently, and yeah, slowly became obsessed with it. And as soon as I started, I didn't actually start doing athletics myself until I was 20.
Okay.
So I was already late to the game. Like I did little bits at school, and then didn't really take it that serious. I was playing football, soccer.
Okay.
And then I had a few knee injuries, as always, as everyone does. And then, yeah, I kind of went to university, all that type of stuff. And it was like, I was 20, and I went, okay, I'm going to start doing athletics now again.
Yeah.
And start doing that.
I'll say this about like the 400. Like it seems like there are a lot more training methodologies that you can do for the 400. There's a lot more approaches that people can get away with. Where with like the 1 and 2, it seems like everybody kind of falls under like short to long in some way. Not everybody, but you know what I mean.
Primarily, primarily. No, absolutely. Like you look at the 100 and you think, okay, well, it's a neural event, right? So it's kind of like, okay, let's think about how we can primarily program that. From the 400, it's a strange one because we talk a lot about different training methodologies in the 400, and depending on who you talk to or who you watch and who you follow, you know, there's a short to long method only is the only way, and then there's obviously some people it's long to short is the only way. Well, in reality, it comes down to your constraint, right? It comes down to your constraint. If you're in a lovely, you know, US high school that's already got the track and it's already got the indoor facility, or you know, or college, for instance, and you've got all that facilities, by all means, knock yourself out. You can go short to long, right? It's warm. You've got the ability to have warm muscles and flexibility, and the ease of, well, we can go fast because there's less risk, right? And then when you look back into kind of things like Eastern European or even just generically European countries where the weather is terrible in the winter months, you don't have indoor facilities because they just don't have that infrastructure. Well, short to long isn't always going to work that way. So it does become more of a traditional look. Now, I am someone who does like to differentiate between a long to short and traditional for 400. So when I say traditional, I mean volume. Lots of extensive,
maybe like
lots
like
of
Clyde Hart.
intensive. Yeah, do you know what? Clyde Hart gets a bit of a bad rep, and depending on who you talk to. And sorry, I shouldn't say Clyde Hart. I should say Coach Hart. Yeah, I have a lot of respect for Coach Hart. Actually, I managed to speak to him a few times actually back in the day. But yeah, and there is a
and that wasn't a jab I was throwing there. Just
not at all. Sorry, yeah. No, I just have this vision in my head of one person who always jabs at Clyde Hart.
Who's that?
Well, that'd be Tommy Holler.
Yeah, I figured.
And you know, we could always go into that conversation, but something that's a little bit more volume based, a little bit more towards high volume, less intensity, and then kind of balloons it in and back out into speed and intensity and less volume type scenario. Whereas a traditional model, so that'd be classed as more traditional, and then there's a long to short, I guess, is still intensity. You're just coming from a slightly longer rep perspective.
Yeah.
With less volume. So yeah, there's plenty of nuance in the 400, and that's what kind of got me a little bit. The more I looked into what other people did, and that kind of wrote on some random articles on websites when the forums used to be big, and I used to get obsessed with that and looking at what different people did, because that's the little, you know, you see it all the time now on social media when everyone goes, oh, to run this fast you must do this, and it's like, okay, cool.
Yeah,
not entirely true, but you know, it's all about context and what came before it and what's going to come after it.
Yeah, it's like on Instagram you'll see like, oh, if you're doing 8x200, you're automatically old school, but in a certain context, like that might be a perfectly fine workout.
No, absolutely is. That's the thing. I think I say that sometimes myself and go, okay, an 8x2 of 2 minutes running roughly 30 seconds. You go, that is a standard I'm going to use the inverted commas you just mentioned there, like an old school session. But in reality, depending on what the intensity is and the time of the year, it's a perfectly fine session. And every session you can ever think of is a perfectly fine session. And I genuinely do mean that.
Yeah.
It just comes down to when and why and where does it fit in your model. And I think a lot of people get a little bit confused sometimes, and they'll follow someone off Instagram for whatever reason or whatever, without really knowing the context of why
people get dogmatic.
what they're doing. Yeah.
You get dogmatic. Yeah.
And it's like, it must be, you must do it this way, you must do it this way. And I must admit, sometimes I get a little bit dogmatic myself when I respond to it. I like pushing buttons sometimes. I can be a bit of a tit.
I've heard. And
I don't mind it. I don't mind it. I think I want people to think about what they're doing rather than just saying this is the only way. And it's like, well, I have no issues in pushing people's buttons, because it sparks conversation, it sparks thinking about it. And same thing for me. If I do a session, I want my athletes to question it. I want them to say, what is this session and why we're doing it? Because
you know, that's one thing I've noticed in the UK especially. Having previously had a coach myself, I know I was self-coach myself, obviously, but there's no, like, it seems like in sport, and we'll say specifically track and field because we're talking about track and field, but in sports in general, sports training, we tend to just say, there tends to be this thing where it's like, oh, do this workout, you get better. Oh, don't question, just do it. It's like, it just feels so mindless and unscientific, really. So I feel like that's something so common, where we were given something at the start, but never explained why and how we do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that's down to education systems a little bit in the UK. I don't mean that as in education as in like just normal education, but in coaches education. Education is they're worlds apart depending on where you are in the world. You know, like the US. I don't want to just fanboy over the US, because I think everyone would say that probably has issues as well. But its coaching system and coaching knowledge is so much more deep. You know, the fact that there's the USATF credential system, and I do apologize, I can never get it right, but like whatever it is, the USSSTTTF,
it's
whatever
like,
it is,
something like that,
whatever that is. But that also has an education system. You've got these two bodies that are creating information and data and knowledge and sharing it. And it became very evident again around COVID, right? In the US, there was an awful lot more webinars about stuff, and there's a few big groups that were created from that, and I tried to get onto them as much as I possibly could. And the conversation was just much deeper, and you could see that instantly, that the coaches knew more. It wasn't about just doing this and that and X and Y and repeating what they'd already done when they was a kid. But in the UK, we have a very old school coaching methodology or pedagogy of
very common
developing coaches. It's very minor. I mean, without dissing the UK system too much, although it sounds like I'm going to, to get a coaching license in the UK up until several years ago, all you had to do was attend a one-day, seminar, not even a seminar.
How does it work now?
Well, it's a little bit different. I mean, that is still the case at a lower level. And it has developed a little bit. In fact, they kind of messed that up, in all honesty, but there is now a lot more depth into that knowledge. But again, it becomes, there's a few little bits of dogmatism, don't go with that, where it says, this is speed endurance, this is specific endurance, this is special endurance, but only give minor details of of an example. And I think you need to give people the information of what it is to allow them to develop their own information around it. So we have been a little bit behind the things on that in reality, but it's getting there. It's just going to take a while.
I was wondering, so do you ever feel like in the UK they fear speed work? Because I feel like these people don't trust that they can actually do speed work with their athletes. It's like, because it feels like a lot of them do long to short. And I weirdly enough, when I speak to coaches in the UK, most of them don't know what I mean when I say long to short and short to long. Again, not as developed as Americans, right? And when I explain to them what I mean, I'm like, oh, well, why do you do speed work in the winter a bit? And obviously, you can still do speed work in a long to short program, but just not as much, obviously, right? But
every program should have it,
Yeah, but they're like, oh, you can't do it, injury risk, this and that. and it's
or
like
peaking
you think to
or
yourself,
something.
yeah, it's I've heard those like the amount of times I get frustrated, like, oh my god, this is so behind times. How are we still doing this? Like, it's do you still see a lot of that where people say when there's this dogma against speed work and fearing speed work and say, oh, you're gonna get injured or whatever, or peaking often. Do you hear that a lot?
I think there definitely is, and I think it becomes kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Because you'll get coaches who will do, and again, this comes down to because of the weather sometimes, right? It's easy when we go down to the track on a Tuesday night and a Thursday night in the UK, and it's pouring down with rain, and it's easier to stand there with a stopwatch and just say, go run X reps in X time with 4 minutes recovery, right? Because then the intensity isn't that high.
Mm-hmm.
They feel like they've done a workout because you're tired regardless, right? Let's just say a section. Let's say I'm going to give you 5 250s off 4 minutes, right? Let's just say that as a random one, right? A standard typical winter session for most, and the athletes are knackered by the end of it. Cool. As a coach, I haven't really had to pay much attention. I just say set and go and whatever, and give a shout out at a time. It's easy. I don't want to say coaches are lazy. That's not true. But it's easier, and especially when you've got a million kids, right? There's definitely a professionalism issue in the UK versus other countries with coaches. So, most of our coaches in the UK are primarily those who are the parents of an athlete once upon a time, and they would come down to the track to support their kid, and no one else is doing a job, so therefore they jump in to do a job. And again, where's their education process of learning the sport, of learning the event, the physiology, the mechanics of speed? I'm sorry, I digress in a little bit here. So it becomes easier to do that. And then they do it for the winter months. So they don't spend too much time doing the speed stuff. It's hard to do speed stuff when it's cold and wet and miserable. Not hard, but it's you've got to pay attention more. Okay, you've got to focus a little bit more.
And
then when they come
it
down
carries
to
more risk going out in the cold like that.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
So they stay long. They come to spring when weather gets a little bit better. They say, okay, now perfect. Let's go 5 times 60 meters, flat out, hamstrings pop. Cool, because you're not prepped. And so they go, oh, I'm scared. And so then see, speed work, it messed you up, and therefore they don't want to do it again. And that's where the program then becomes slightly more, well, we won't go too fast. What we'll do is we'll do intensive tempo. We'll add more lactic work rather than doing speed work. And that then becomes a self-fulfilling philosophy. The fact that they don't want to do speed work because it has messed athletes up. And you're right. It's athletes need to get exposure to those mechanics and forces and movement patterns as early as possible. It's about repetition. It's about that repeatability of what they do day in, day out. It's a tough balance, especially in the UK. It's definitely a tough balance in the UK, just from a men's perspective and a professionalism perspective of coaches.
Yeah, I feel like this is the case for like all of sport science in the UK. I find that so like I don't really listen, to be honest. Majority, except you, obviously you're a great coach, or some other coaches in the UK, one or two, right? Especially in the South. What I know in the South is England's better, but like majority of them, like I'm not listening to. I'll just listen to some American coach or Charlie Francis, the Canadian, one of arguably the greatest sprint coach of all time, right? I would listen to them and it wouldn't bother with the UK. I'm like, well, this is like, they're not really pushing the needle. And plus, I mean, you can at least tell by the performances as well, which is something we can get onto later why the UK performances aren't good. But any other questions you have, Elijah?
So I was gonna say, like, with some coaches are afraid of speed work, but then with the popularity of Feed the Cats now, the pendulum's kind of swung the other way. And now it's like, oh, any aerobic work is just automatically bad. Oh, if you're not going all out during everything, it's automatically bad. Do you want to comment on that a little bit?
Yeah, do you know what? It's absolutely right. So, do I want to say it? Sod it, I'll say it. Right. So, Tony Holler has made himself a famous position, right? And I'm going to say it because I'm obviously pro Coach Hart, right? He's going, oh, Coach Hart ruined coaching in America and athletes and high school kids, right? Blah, 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 blah. Okay, no. What happened was the education system failed those athletes. coaches didn't understand how to read the program that Coach Hart wrote in those compendiums, right?
Mm-hmm.
They didn't understand the nature of the athletes that was being dealt with. They didn't correctly adjust. So that wasn't a Coach Hart issue. That was an educational perspective of the coaches, inverted commas, who were using that program to simply lift and shift onto the athletes and break them. Absolutely correct, right? Now, I will go the other way and say, now, for years where the people going, oh, that program ruined athletes, I will now say Feed the Cats is ruining athletes, right? You can cut that quote and you can put it out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we've now got coaches who are doing the exact opposite, where they won't do anything other than 10-yard flies or 10-meter flies, right? I actually genuinely had an athlete come to me 2 years ago, come to university, who ran great as a high school kid, right? Great as a teenager up until 17, 18 when they went to university, came to university, right? All they ever did was 10-meter bloody flies, right?
Mm-hmm.
That kid's mechanics were absolutely whack. They were the worst mechanics I'd ever seen. This guy had power, he had quickness, he could not run. And he could run 100 meters in about, I think at that point, like 10.71 seconds, right? And again, nothing shabby with that time, right? Absolutely great. But it was based off the fact that he could just twitch. He could twitch, right? He couldn't, his mechanics were so bad, he was injured almost constantly. He couldn't handle any type of workload that passed a 10-meter fly. So it just started, and I see it all the time now, and people starting to do all this thing and going, no, it's all we do and they get quick. Cool. For a team sport athlete who's already doing their aerobic work, their skill work, and their gym work, absolutely fine, right? It's all perfectly good. For a track athlete, if you're only doing Feed the Cats, you might as well say goodbye to the rest of your career, okay? Now, I understand when you're young and you've got scholarships on the line that you want to be as quick as you possibly can, as young as possibly can, because it opens doors. Perfect, no worries. Knock yourself out, get your education paid for. In fact, I applaud that idea. Go ahead and do that. So education in America, sometimes I look at it and just think, oh my God, that's expensive as heck. But
yeah, definitely.
You're overclocking your kids so early, and we'll probably come on to that conversation as well. And it's caused so many issues now in trying to rectify. And Tony Hollow will make the argument, oh, if only they used this program in college and at the pros. And I go, no offense, Tony, you've been saying this now for 10 years and no one's hired you. Why do you think that is? Genuinely, someone should hire me and go into a university, go into a college, and I will. No, there's a reason why you've not been hired, because you're talking trash. Sorry. Yeah. Again, cut it. I don't care. Right?
Not touching it. No, say anything.
I mean, make it. You can put that out there on social media, right?
For sure.
And the same thing has now happened. His program has worked in a certain scenario. Like, he's obviously highlighted his one athlete. What was it, Marcellus?
Marcellus
right?
Moore.
Yeah. Now, Tony came across to the UK several years ago to do a lecture thing, right? And me and the mate jumped onto that. So we went there and we called him out on, and people didn't like that we called him out on it. But Marcellus was playing American football. He was in the gym. He was already doing the stuff that he says he doesn't. I don't do gym. My athletes do. No, Tony, you don't do gym. Your athletes do gym in their sport, right? You don't do aerobic work. No, Tony, you don't do aerobic work. Your athletes do aerobic work in their sport. So you're absolutely correct. In an environment where they have something else that's developing those skills, absolutely. Feed the Cats works perfect, right? Mm-hmm. Lovely. Not for track. Sorry, that's my rant.
And I don't want to dogpile.
It's a brilliant run.
I don't want to dogpile Tony too much, but
yeah.
Another thing with Marcellus is he was a club athlete as well. Like if you look on
he was. Yeah.
So I mean, I'm not gonna go any further than that, but like it's
he had
the Cats
coach,
totally limited.
It's
totally limited.
Yeah. I will say one thing also. I even feel like even we can obviously say yes, for a team sport athlete it's probably really good, but even for a team sport athlete, hey, maybe you should increase your distance from 10 meters to 20 meters because you're still limiting your technical ability.
there's
Yeah,
a caveat, right? There's a caveat,
yeah,
and that's the whole thing. And again, it comes down to team sport. Okay, and forgive my ignorance here when it comes to most team sports. Obviously, I played a few, but American football, how many of those players actually run further than 10 yards, 10 meters, right? Not many, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
Forgive me for my ignorance.
yes,
No.
yes.
I mean,
But
we have the 40-yard dash because the 40-yard dash, right? Because that's usually as
mm,
far
Mhm.
as the kick returners go. It's
Mm.
rare that anybody goes
yeah,
past 40 yards. So
yeah, exactly right. And it's same with most sports. You go, okay, well, what's the realistic nature of their work, right? In soccer, it's primarily acceleration work, right? There's an awful lot of acceleration and agility work. Basketball, obviously, that is agility, full stop,
yeah,
and little things like that. So yeah, there's some parts of team sports where it could warrant it. And again, we're talking about mechanical health, which I mentioned about one of the athletes. It's 10 when someone's only got a 10-yard or a 10-meter sprint, they do not care about mechanics. They're just twitching to get there as quick as possible, and
It's
they'll
not challenging
dip.
either. It's
Yeah,
not challenging.
it's just over, right? And to get the fluidity of movement, the timing, and we I'm sure we all, sounds quite wrong here, but we'll all watch videos of Bolt and Asafa Powell and all those athletes in slow motion and just think how beautiful that looks, right? It's just
yeah,
poetic movement. And even some of the modern athletes sometimes, although some of them are getting, not quite as smooth, but there are a couple who just think the timing on the thigh switch and the ground contact and the arm swing and the torso, it's just a lovely fluid movement, right? It just looks perfect.
hmm
And then you get an athlete who's just ragging their body for 10 meters. And it's like, well, okay, that's not going to go anywhere. And yes, they can still run a good 100-meter time. And but what's that? If they're a 1-2 athlete, if they're a track athlete, but their 200 time is like double their 100 plus a whole second sometimes, it's like, well, that tells you exactly what they're doing. They're just breaking down and can't handle it. So yeah, it's one thing. We have gone way too much the other way in some places. There's definitely a place for feed the cats. I don't want to use the term feed the cats actually because I just hate selling that methodology. But there's definitely a place for doing short intensity focused work for speed for team athletes. Absolutely.
yeah,
For a track athlete perspective, you're selling yourself way too short. And if they don't understand how aerobic development increases that mitochondrial activity, increases the ATP resynthesis, which, it's all these things that play into itself, and how low level aerobic work is a low level plyometric to some degree, right? It's tissue resilience, and if we're just going to completely ignore that, then you're not a coach.
I've got a question in regards to the longer work. So if someone like Clyde Hart, who's trained Michael Johnson, I'll say the white American guy he trained, who became Olympic champion.
Jeremy Warner,
Jeremy Warner, yes,
and then Sonia Richard Ross, she's a woman, 48 seconds or so.
Yeah. So a lot of this program is very intense, right, and extensive in terms of the volume he does, right? Do you think it's the case that his program is only for certain? It doesn't work for everyone. It may only work for certain people who have the physical structure to be able to do that, this physiology, or do you not? Do you think it's the case that it's just how you implement it?
I think it's massively about how you implement it. Right? So I think there's always going to be a case of, and people argue all the time, and I hear it all the time when everyone talks about Hart and Baylor, and they go, well, they recruit people, right? They recruit fast people. And absolutely, well done. That's their job. So, okay, cool. But this was the issue again, like I mentioned before, about the fact that when the accusation that Hart ruined athletes, right? No, the education of how you apply the system, right? Every system in reality can work, right? It's just depending on how you apply it to the right level of athlete that you have. And again, I mentioned context again, so environmental factors really play into how you apply something, right? But if you just strip down what Clyde Hart was doing and ignore the sessions, right? Because I think that's what people get tied into. They get tied into the sessions. They go, oh my God, it was 16 200s. And you go, it's just ridiculous. You go, okay, cool, but what was it? Well, when he was doing 16 200s, it was extensive tempo. right? So you just write down, okay, did extensive tempo. Ignore what the session was. You write down, it's extensive tempo. Perfect, right? It did race modeling. Okay, cool. What's that? It's SE2, right? Okay, so that's an SE2 session. He has his, what they call speed makers. Okay, cool. Not quite speed because he was still continuous running between, but you could almost put that down as like, what would you class it as? I would class it as GSSE, right? So it'd be glycolytic sports short speed endurance, right? So you go, okay, well that's that session, you know, and then it changed to other parts, and you just write it down like that, and you go, okay, cool. So what is the program in the end? Well, the program in the end is 2 extensive tempo sessions, an SE2 session, and a GSSE going into ASSE session, and little things like that, and you go, okay, cool. So you got. I'm not saying you become a slight reductionist on it, but if you ignore what the session was, and then you go, okay, this was, you know, I think at the back, and this is off memory by the way, so I do apologize. Like at the back of that 16-page paper that everyone seems to share when they say Clay Hart's program, right? It has like a little percentages, doesn't it, of how much each is done throughout the year. And if you look at it, obviously it's long to short or whatever, but there's still speed in there throughout the program. There's extensive tempo that builds into intensive tempo. There's SE2 that becomes SE1. There's SE1 that becomes SE2. You know, it's just understanding those parts and where they fit, and then adjusting it. So, you know, you could say, okay, his program essentially used extensive tempo to become intensive tempo as a pyramid, I guess, towards competition. Cool. If you ignore the sessions, just do something similar. Okay, how does that look, right? How does that work on my Monday or my Friday or my Tuesday or whatever? And you start to play around like that. And I think that's where people get too bogged down a little bit when they look at a program and they go, oh my God, what is the session? Well, the sessions are relevant to the athlete because the athlete can take that amount of work. If you reduce it down and understand the components of what that session is and how it interplays throughout the microcycle, you know, and so on, you can definitely play around with it and make things work. Absolutely, I've tried it myself. I've done it myself. I've tried it on myself. But you just go, okay, well, what's a version of that I can adjust to fit? And again, that's what I mean. That was the issue when it came down to where people just applying it, right? They apply it literally like for like. It says 16/200s off 1 minute. Everyone's got 16/200s off 1 minute, and you better improve 1 second by next week. Okay, no, that wasn't. Yeah, that is exactly right. What was done for those athletes at that time in that space and time, but what was the message? What was the part of it? And I think once you start looking at it like that, you start to understand it a bit more. And I think that's where coaches, and this is the issue again, coaches don't reduce it down to those bits. They just look at it and copy and paste it. And that is the issue. That's always the issue.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, if you look at, just look at like Michael Johnson, your average teenager is not Michael Johnson. No one is. Like,
I was
you have to just shorten it down.
Like, you don't run under 44 seconds. What was it, 18 times for Michael Johnson? You don't do that under a bad program. And in 1932 as well. Like, so there's speed development there in some way too.
I mean, that's it, right? You go and they go, oh, he already ran, I don't know where he ran. I think he ran 20 point or whatever it was before he came to college. Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. He ran 20 point. He ended up running 19.3. Yeah. It's like, that's a massive improvement. And, and that's what people forget about a little bit. They go, oh yeah, the 400. Well, okay, if we want to argue the 400, we could almost say the 400 actually wasn't as successful as it should have been, right? Which is a bizarre thing to think about for Johnson. For other athletes, yes, you look at it and you go, okay, your ratios are about right, so that's fine. But he still ran 19.3, right? So whatever people think, oh, it doesn't develop speed. I'm sorry, you can get let's just say, for instance, getting a 30-second athlete down to 22 seconds is a whole lot easier than getting someone who's already run a 20 point down to 19 low. Mm-hmm. I think that's what people forget a little bit sometimes. It's like a lot hard. When athlete gets faster, it becomes a whole lot harder to improve.
Yeah, definitely. I got to ask one question. So, I've talked to different coaches and this and that. A lot of people say, "Oh, you have to do speed work to improve speed. It's max recovery, or max intent, max recovery, obviously, whatever, right? Not speed of cut, just in general, max intent over a distance."
Yeah.
That's what obviously a lot of even elite coaches say. And then the studies, I'm pretty sure from the little amount of studies about speed work that there is that are good, or from the academic side, say the same thing. Do you think it's the case that they just haven't studied Clyde Hart's system properly? Because most people are against it. What do you think is the reason?
Well, this is, yeah, it's a very good point, right? Because let's just be blunt, there is zero real research in athletics, right? There just isn't, because you can't. There's too many variables, and that becomes the problem, right? And that's where people start saying, to be a coach, you've got to understand the art form. I'm not saying, the art form, but there is kind of like almost like a gut feeling element to it, right? Go, I know that works. Can I explain it? Not really.
Yeah, it's intuitive.
But, yeah, and there's no way of it being explicit. You just can't. It's just impossible, right? And the research that we do is so confined, and we do stuff and we go, oh, look at this session that was done for 6 weeks on high school kids, and it was 30-meter flies, and they'd all improved by 1% or 2%, and therefore this proves that this works. Okay, cool. Resisted sprinting. Okay, cool. Yeah, this works over this period. Hill training. Okay, cool. What are all these in context of each other? Boom, into an actual program. We have very little. All the money, for instance, is in aerobic work, right? All the money is in cycling and long distance marathon running.
Super training talking about this. They talk about this super training, yeah.
Okay.
How yeah.
It's like, I mean, it's all the money's in those events. That's where all the research is. We know how to develop VO2. We know how to develop, lactate thresholds 1 and 2, all this kind of stuff. It's like, cool. What do we really understand? I'm trying to think of the names down. I want to say Martin Bashir, not Martin Bashir. Geez, that's a really bad reporter. I've got a book on my shelf. I'm just trying to find it real quick. I can't find. I've got too many books. There it is. High intensity interval training. They've done the closest bit of research. Let me just grab that book. I can't remember the names now. Sorry, my office room is like a library, right? Oh, it's Bichette. So Lawson and Bichette, right? So the science application of high intensity interval training is the closest we actually have to anyone really doing the type of research into work that we would do as sprint coaches. And even that is nowhere near the real type of work that we do. So yeah, no one's ever going to really, they're never going to get signed off, and they're never going to be approved because there's too many variables. So like all the research is, when we do like a short to long program, or if you look at a feed the catch program, for instance, and not exactly, but I mean in research, all the research is very similar to that. It's you do X session 3 times a week for 6 weeks. What's the improvement? Is there an improvement? It's not you do sessions X, Y, Z, and they all interact and interplay. There's always, and I've been guilty myself of looking into the work of Issurin, for instance. We talk about residuals of training, and those residuals state that you must do a speed impetus every 5 to 7 or 8 days to maintain speed. And you go, okay, cool. If I'm going to program, then I need to have at least 1 speed session a week. And then you look at Clyde Hart's and you go, okay, so let's go backwards. Actually, I just kind of went back on myself a little bit there. I just remembered, like, if you look at Issurin's research papers, right, and it talks about the residuals of training effect, and if you look at Bondarchuk, right, and his work on, what was his work on? Geez, training crossover or whatever it was, right? And if you look at both of those books in isolation, and then look at Clyde Hart's program, for instance, or a normal or a traditional or even a long to short program, ignore the short one. I mean, when I say long to short, I mean a program that starts with 2 500s of 20 minutes recovery, right? It's still intensity, it's just not short speed, right?
Yeah.
And then if you look at what Issurin says and Bondarchuk says, they're very similar, right? You look at it and go, okay, you need a speed impetus at least once a week. You can maintain aerobic work for, without touching it for at least, X amount of days, 30 days, I think it is off the top of my head, right? And you go look at Bondarchuk and you go, well, actually, the biggest crossover to 400 is 300s and 500s, right? And you go, okay, cool. And then you look at some programs like Clyde Hart, and you go, in theory, a lot of those, I'm going to say, is Isherin and Bondarchuk Eastern? Were they Russian? I'm going to say
Eastern,
Russian.
Russians, yes. Bondarchuk was Ukrainian. Bondarchuk was Ukrainian,
Okay,
Isherin Russian, yeah.
Old bloc type stuff, right?
Eastern European, yeah.
Yeah, so you look at that type of programming just on paper. It's very similar to what a lot of the older coaches would have done, right? You have one speed session a week. You look at Clyde Hart's and you go, okay, you got a speed maker in there. Tick that box in theory. You go, well, okay, theory, yes,
good enough.
Yeah. And then you go, okay, how much aerobic work did you do? Okay, cool. And then how far out did the aerobic work actually stop prior to your competition? You go, okay, in theory, that's kind of works to the issue and stuff a little bit. And, your specificity around distance, because for some reason in the world, we've got so scared about letting athletes go to 300 and 500. It's like almost a badge of honor sometimes when athletes go, I don't go over 300 meters in my training session. I'm like, okay, good for you. And it's like those little bits, right? It's if you look at some of the research, but nothing, they kind of match almost. You can make anything match, right? And just use the information there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if we'll ever get to a point where university or college is willing to fund a really, really decent research.
There's too many moving
parts. One important thing is, I believe Rolf Omen said in this podcast, he said, I'm not going to let some researcher take my 10 flat or 9 guy and make a program. I will do that. I'm the researcher. That's my athlete. I take care of him, you know what I mean? Or them, or I take him or her, right? So, like, they're not going to touch you. And it's also like the case where we don't. I mean, I've spoken to many. I've spoken to a couple at the gym. I maybe see some because I live in Nottingham, so you see students in Nottingham University go to the local gyms, commercial gyms. I've spoken to them, and they don't really know anything about speed training. They don't get taught it. Like you don't get taught anything about speed work. So it's kind of hard for kids to get young people to get in sports science to get excited and want to research speed work because they think, it's just probably flying turns or acceleration. There's no deep thinking because they don't have it in their material.
Well, you're right, and that's an education. But as we have, as I'm based out of Warwick Uni, for instance, primarily, and in the athletes that were at Loughborough, sports science is massive. But again, for what? All they ever measure is they'll measure a 10-meter fly, and okay, cool, and then they'll measure.
Really, even at Loughborough.
Oh, sometimes, yeah. It depends on who's doing it, right? So if even at Loughborough, for instance, if we manage to access the UK Athletics Opta jump, for instance, then that's different. I'll get 30 meters, but no one has access to stuff, and people, all they want to do is just prove a small theory around potentiation, right? It's like, okay, cool, I've got a theory on potentiation. I mean, it's those little bits, and so we're just not really pushing the envelope enough, especially in the UK. And I think it's just easy just to trudge along a little bit, I think. And, I think because there's no jobs, I think, in reality for sports science. If you're coming up with loads of ideas in the US, there's a whole different world for you. Even from how many people do we see on social media who have some random idea, but they make a business out of it because there's enough footfall, right? In the UK, we really don't have that because also we're too shy. I think that about myself sometimes as well. I think just go on social media, Stuart, and just rant a little bit, and then maybe you'll get some traction, and then you'll get a good job in an American high school or college, and then you can make it from there. But on the flip side, I'm like, oh no, Stuart, please don't do that. You'll rock too many boats. And I was, I think an American mindset I absolutely love is just, nope, I'm going to make it regardless. I'm going to shout about it as much as I want. I'm going to sell it as much as I possibly can. And there's definitely people who are in the US who do.
Like in the US, and I'd say Canada also. Canada's got a big sports system as well. They're obviously in hockey and American football.
Yeah.
So they got really big jobs there. What's your next question, Elijah? Go.
Oh, so we could kind of pivot. We talked a little bit about methodology, but I want to kind of pivot towards strength work. I don't know. What are your views
Sure.
on like strength work in the gym, like weights, plyos, whatever?
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. Well, actually, just going back to methodology, actually, just real quick.
Yeah.
What I will say is that, right?
Hmm.
And this, I don't mean to ruffle any feathers, any from it, but
Yeah.
I have this saying to people: if your coach says, "I'm a short to long person. I only do short to long person," right? I only do short to long. Walk away from them. Walk away from them, right? Because I genuinely believe that as a coach, you should be open to every single methodology that's available to improve your athlete. So for instance, even myself, I haven't actually, there's a really good saying, isn't there, in coaching about the fact of, have you done 10 years of coaching or have you done 1 year of coaching 10 times, right? And I change my program every single year. I do not repeat the same program every single year. I might keep elements that I found successful, but look at the athletes of how they've developed over the past years and see what the gaps are for that athlete and then move on from there. Okay. Don't stick to the same methodology. You need to be open to other chances, otherwise you'll never really find, you could get a class of 10 athletes, and because one of those athletes has ran superb, you just, okay, cool, my program works. Yeah, but there's 9 athletes left, right? What else? What do they need? Run 3 programs at the same time. And yes, as a coach, it can be like, oh my God, that's confusing as hell. I don't know what I'm doing. And then you just develop more skill and understanding about your athletes. Like I joked at the start, it's not really a joke, but I'm obsessed with 400.
Hmm.
This year, for instance, I'm running 3 different 400 programs. Right? There's just 3 different programs because their athletes are different. But at the same time, I still coach my short sprinters 1s and 2s because I want to run different programs because I'm learning stuff from each program offers me something different. I go, okay, athlete over here developed from this, maybe that can work on this athlete in this other program and vice versa. So playing around different programs lets you as a coach really, really develop your understanding of how things interplay. And it really is crucial that you try just different methodologies sometimes, because it really does help you develop. And then flipping it back onto the other side, by the way. So yeah, sorry, my apologies. I just went on that rant again. So S&C, plyos, and things like that becomes. So I actually program the S&C myself for my athletes. I don't use external S&C. I am educated in S&C. I have a degree, and little things along those lines. I've changed methodology again in the gym a lot over the years. I've played around with quite a few different ways to do stuff. I do tend to come back to a few elements here and there. And I think we've almost done the same thing when we talk about the heart versus
Holler.
hollow time stuff. The same things kind of happened in the gym, right? We look back at early 2000s, late 90s kind of gym sessions where it was like, you're going to be strong as hell, right? We look at what was the Barry Ross stuff?
Yeah.
Oh my word, what was that called?
Mass Pacific Force, right?
Yeah. So, like lots of hex bar stuff, right?
Yeah.
You've got a good memory, man. I like you.
Yeah. I'm
So
a student
little
of the
stuff
game.
like so little stuff from the early 2000s, late 90s, and like with all the coaches from back there, it was like, there's the element of bigger, faster, stronger. It was like, yeah, use like 3 or 4 main compound body lifts, but you would add plyometrics, right? You would do that kind of complex training. You'd do a squat and then you'd do box jumps or hurdle jumps, right? It was about expression of force, essentially, right? The training was force in some shape or form. It was create mass of the body, make it strong, but also make it powerful, but without having too many variabilities into it. It was simple. It was do a squat, do a box jump. It was do a long jump. It was do hurdle jumps. Then we kind of went very much into world of Bosch, where everyone was like, stability, and it's like, you'll do stuff on one leg and you'll have a lovely water bag, and yes, absolutely, there's elements of that which help create more kind of fascial tension and things like that, and we kind of bring that into it. But then we kind of gone completely the other way, more towards that type of single leg balance stuff, very Bosch-esque, or kind of influenced by Bosch, and then other people have kind of ran with it a little bit. And then we've got into the world of social media, where people have absolutely focused on one stupid idea and oversold it as being the most important thing in the world. And I've been guilty of doing all of it, reading into it, going, oh, that must be the way. Let me try it. And in reality, you end up coming back to being quite basic, right? You just come back to being quite basic. And you go, okay, you know what? Because your athletes are already doing so much work. And don't get me wrong, I have a little bit of a mixture. So my current programming, I add low level. So basically, I program plyometrics throughout my entire training week, right? So very similar to a kind of Altus, I guess, to some degree, where you do the rudiment type stuff. So we will do a bit of warm up. We'll do some mobility stuff, a few activation things, and then we'll do low level plyos. So stuff like a la rudiment type basic stuff, just to get a little bit of system stiffness in there. We'll continue with a few drills like that. Again, we're in the UK, so we're talking about trying to warm up primarily here rather than anything else. But using drills are, people bag on drills a lot, because what are you doing drills for? Well, drills do actually, whether you like it or not, instill movement patterning. I've seen that myself with my athletes, that the repetition of drill of a particular movement pattern does become almost second nature, even when they're running. I've had a couple of athletes who I've had for like 10 years, in fact, longer than that, actually. In fact, one of them actually PB'd last week, right? I've had him for 10 years, he still managed to PB, which I just find absolutely love that. But his movement pattern is exactly the way I want it to be through drills. We've developed his coordination, his capacities, and things like that over the years. So we'll do that, and then we'll finish off with some more bigger expression plyometrics and things like that. And we'll even do some reflexive eccentrics. So I'm a big believer in quantity of plyometrics, believe it or not. Now, I know that's going to sound counterintuitive, because a lot of people are talking about just microdosing plyometrics because they're such high expression force. Well, guess what? Jogging down the street is even more force. So if they can't do plyometrics, then we've got more issues. But they do help coordinate that vertical force expression or horizontal force expression. So we'll depend on what type of year we're at or what the session is, will dictate what type of plyometrics, whether it's a speed bound or it's a hurdle jump or something along those lines. And I'm gonna absolutely freeze my brain again. I hate it. There's an American coach, passed away. Carol Gilbert Smith was coached by him, I believe.
Tony Wells.
Well done. Oh God, we're gonna get home. Yes, Tony Wells. Yeah, but like he would have like 6 times 100-meter bounds at the end of the session type scenario, right?
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that, because it's force expression. You can get away with doing a little bit less running, and you can run almost a shorter program, but then add those little bits in through a range of motion force expression. So I do add little bits like that into my program as well. I don't go as crazy as that, because my athletes can't handle that, because they're not that elite or they're at club level. My elite athletes could handle that quite well when they were running there, but my club level athletes can't handle that. And then, I'm a big fan of reflexive eccentrics, so anything that can get a fast movement through the hamstrings. As we know, eccentric force is much higher than concentric, so I'm trying to activate as much of that as possibly can and work that into the session. So my gym sessions will actually be a mixture, right? So we'll probably have 7 or 8 exercises. Now, it's not as big as that actually sounds, right? Because 3 of them will be main body lifts, right? So it might be a hang clean or hang clean split, for instance. But the hang clean split, so if you can explain that, obviously it's just a normal hang clean to shoulders, but the legs will land in a split position. So there's my reflexive eccentric, right? You're landing in a low split position. So I've got my force expression on the hang, and then I'm going to catch it in my eccentric reflexive position. So I'm hitting a few birds with one stone there. Same thing then with, let's say the next heavy part of the session will be either a half squat or hex deadlift. I don't particularly use Olympic deadlifts anymore, just from a position point of view. And then we'll have an upper body, but then we'll add some stuff in that looks a little bit Bosch-esque, a little bit more reflexive, a little bit more coordinative, because I still want that fascial kind of movement pattern around, a little bit of stability work in there. So they'll just microdose those in as short bits after. But primarily, I kind of play around with that. Now, what I would do, so that's a normal type program. As I get towards competition, that will change. So I do actually follow a little bit of a Charlie Francis program when it comes into S&C, if I'm going to be a perfect honest with you right now. Okay. I do EMS. We will do EMS, and we'll do it several weeks out. So if I know we've got a main competition X date, for instance, which is usually like a national champs or something, then I will work back when to implement EMS to get a max strength stimulus. Because I don't want to put too much weight in the gym, right? I don't want to go, okay, here's a squat, and you've got 250 kilograms. Go break your spine. Okay. Yeah. We'll use the gym to help a little bit create the tissue resilience that we require, but then hit the actual muscle fiber through EMS. And
that will be your maintenance.
Yeah. And then we'll back off. And then I've always used complex training, strength exercise, power exercise, primarily plyometric or something on those, or that ilk, or even a jump squat, for instance. Obviously, people want to term it as a French contrast, but it could just be double complex. But French contrast as we get close to competition. So I will implement a French contrast. I have found good response from like the stretch shortening cycle to complex training, and especially with double complex. So max, light, medium, lighter type situation. So I do find a French contrast really does work in just tightening the body up a smidge, getting ready for competition. So that does work. And I do use that going into competition about 5 weeks out.
Okay, yeah. So you said you put down a lot there, so I kind of want to go back.
Yeah, sorry.
No problem. No, I love it.
Just rambling along. Yeah.
With drills, there's some people that are just like, oh, drills do absolutely nothing. They don't carry over. It's a completely different movement. Well, what if you just do a drill where you bleed into a run, and like you'll notice the effect right away. Like sometimes I've done like straight leg bounds and then go into a normal run at 30 meters, and you feel it right away. You feel the difference. So
yeah, no, it's exactly right, and I get what people will try and say, because apparently it's the other that something has to be specific. Okay, cool. If nothing specific doesn't exact doesn't work, then why on earth we're doing anything at all ever? Okay, cool. Just get to the track and just sprint straight.
Just run 100 meters every day. Yeah.
Just go into it and do it. Yeah. And it makes me laugh. But yeah, learning a body position, a coordinated position. Practicing the hip hike. I found back in. Well, I'm trying to think when Yaz and Amy ran really good. So back in 2000, 2001. No, that's not true. 2021, 2020, 2021. COVID years type scenario, right? So we had a little bit of extra time, because obviously no one was training a little bit, right? So I implemented, I wanted to really focus, because I had a bit of extra time to focus on hip hike, right? Of really getting them to have their swing hip come over the stance hip, right, on a movement. So a lot of people, I'm sure you're familiar, or hopefully familiar with Trachtenberg, right? It's if you look at someone from the front as they're running, their stance leg at mid stance, their swing leg hip will be slightly lower than their stance leg hip.
Oh, right? Yeah.
And it's kind of like a weakness essentially, and everyone says glute medius and all type of stuff like that. There's also adductors and things like that. But so I thought, okay, I want to fix that. So I looked at that and go, okay, basically that was impeding internal rotation through mid stance, right? So I had two female athletes, Yasmin Liverpool and Amy Hilliard, and I wanted to improve how they ran down the back straight and home straight with regards to their hip mechanics and being a little bit stiff and being able to get a bit more internal rotation, hopefully open up their stride a little bit, right? Now, so we worked on that for about a month, and I remember we managed to open up racing. they opened up a track in the UK, and Yasmin ran 51.7 in that race. Is that true, or did she run 51.3? I forgot. she ran a 51 point, and Amy ran a 52.4. Both of them were PBs in that race. But I watched the video back, and I watched the back straight, and both of them had just the most perfect hip hike coming down the straights. And it was exactly what we practiced just through positioning. Learn the position in a drill. Do a simple walk. Find that position of the hip hike, how that feels in the oblique, how that feels with the shoulders rotating and coming over the hip. And we're going to drill it step by step by step by step by step. And as you mentioned, then you go into a slightly quicker. So you go into a stride, and I want you to think about hiking the hip, coming over. Just make it second nature. And then when we go to sprint, you don't need to think about it. I don't want you to try and do anything other than just sprint. But because you've repeated and your body's going, oh, okay, this is how I access this movement pattern. And it definitely does. It definitely does. In my humble opinion, drills do cross over, and not just from it's a muscle strengthening exercise because you're teaching the hip flexors to lift if you're doing you're doing a skip or whatever. Yes, okay, cool. But there's definitely a kinesthetic awareness of body position that you are enabling when you're doing this. So yeah, I'm definitely a drills man.
For sure. Shwan, you got anything?
Yeah. So I was gonna say, back to the lifting. So you said you do a hang clean with a split stance hang clean, right? So a lot of people like this in the past maybe year or two, actually, well, forever, for a long time. People have been arguing about Olympic lifts. Some people say, oh, I don't do Olympic lifts because it's too hard to teach, or I don't do Olympic lifts from the floor because powerlifting is hard. I do hang clean instead, or something like that. Or some people say you have to learn Olympic lifting. What is your opinion on Olympic lifts? Like, do you use them at every athlete, or and segue into that? Do you think the argument that Olympic lifts are technically hard and that's why you shouldn't teach them? Do you think that's a valid argument or no?
I've definitely seen some injuries from Olympic lifting. That's because people have just been a little bit too crazy, going a bit too heavy and a bit too soon. But again, it's the variation and context. So do I don't do Olympic lifting exact, right? I don't do snatch. I don't care for snatch in a million years, right? I just don't care for it. As far the shoulder mobility for a snatch is just slightly off if you haven't got it, and then people will argue that the snatch has so much power. Of course, it has so much power because you're lifting lighter weight. Cool, good for you. Has it got power throughout the entire range of movement, or does it have a peak power? Right, because that's the bit. Because the peak power, where it's got the peak power, is technically at the same position as the clean. Right, it's just that. Basically just before the shoulders type thing. And yeah, there's a little bit there just snapping down, but I'm snapping down. And again, what we're working from a snatch, for instance, well, you're working the reflexive, if you're being perfectly honest, right? So you effectively try to do a hang clean, and then you're reflexive, bang, underneath that position. So that's the important bit. The important bit is, and again, I mentioned it slightly with the Coach Hart stuff, right? It's break it down to what you're actually trying to do. So you've got a concentric movement, fast power. Okay, so there's your peak power part, and then there's a reflexive snap. Okay, cool. Does that have to be in the exact same movement, or can I actually separate them individually and work on reflexive and work on that? Because in the end, the only thing you care about is force development, right?
Yeah.
And tissue development, right? Now, does it have to be a snatch, or can be something else? Of course, it can be something else. Who cares, right? So, can I get away with doing even like you mentioned a clean from the floor? Now, I do like a clean from the floor, but again, there is a slight element of, okay, how does the athlete come out of the floor, right? Are they all back? Are they hips up first or whatever? And yeah, there's a teaching element of that. And you go, well, actually, again, what do I need to develop? Do I need that to develop from there or not? Okay, cool. Can I create enough force from a floor position? No. Okay, do I really need to? Okay, no, don't really need to. I can work on the tissue. You may be doing an RGL or something along those lines. Right? A hang clean for me is like, okay, it ticks so many boxes, right? It's okay, I'm going to go from the knees. I can set my posture up. I'm going to jump out of that as quick as I can. I'm going to give a little bit of pull my arms. What's the force development out of that? Is it that hard to teach? Not really. Do I even need to catch it? Again, there's the question. Do I need to catch it? Can I just do a hang pull? The easiest thing to teach athletes is a hang pull, and it's a good force expression, right? They can develop quite quickly. So athletes get a bit of confidence with that quite quick. Once they've kind of just gone, oh, this is what I do. I do try and jump, or I add a little bit more weight onto it and it becomes more controllable. Okay, perfect. Okay, now I'm getting stronger. I can see myself producing more force. And then, yes, there's a skill element in developing the catch, because the catch, again, what is the catch? The catch is an sudden eccentric load that the body has to catch, right? Again, does it have to be in that position? I think that's always the question. It's like, if you can, do it. Absolutely, if you want to. But it doesn't have to be. You've got to break it down and say, actually, what is it I'm trying to develop, and what is the sensible way to do it? And sometimes, we can do it through other ways and build the tissues up and allow them to do it later on in the line, right? We can do a very, very simple hang pull. We can do a very simple reflexive drop. I do sometimes have the guys, I say guys, I mean guys and girls, just load a bar up onto their shoulders, or in a front position, and then just do a reflexive. Get used to how it feels when you catch low position and work with hamstrings and the body through that methodology as well. So I'm for and against everything. I'm going to be quite annoying. I'm going to be the guy who says it does come down to that context, and honestly, in just being there and go, actually, do I need to? Don't need to at all. If I can, go for it. Because if I can do a full clean, great. If I can do it well, I think the Olympic clean is pointless, because it's just you're just hitting the bar with a hip essentially, and you're not really getting a good load. I think what's it called? A muscle clean, is that the right term? I don't know. Power clean is more beneficial, because it's a bit more loaded. We're not trying to really bounce it off the thighs. We're not going to the Olympics. But yeah, there definitely are ways to load the tissue up in reality. I think that's all you really need to think about all the time. No matter what you're doing in the gym or doing on the track, is, can I do something else? If I can do something else that does the same thing, which is the easier thing to do.
I was wondering, I know this is a bit of a minute question, but as you said about the hip, the contact of the bar with the hip or the upper thigh, I like to think that is very important, and that's where you get a lot of intensity. And I feel like the neuromuscular, and I'll just say mental to make it simple, contraction, like your brain, like I think goes a bit kind of crazy with the drive essentially. That's what I'm trying to say. I think it's so intense in the contact with the thigh, and then I guess when you obviously do the catch position and the power thing, that is the only thing that's important. I've seen, because a lot of people don't do the bump against the thigh, upper thigh or hip.
Yeah, I've never found it to be important. No, I guess I've had people do it and then unfortunately got bruised from it quite bad, and then it causes more issues. But
bruising the upper thigh or hip?
Yeah, upper thigh, just from that contact.
I haven't seen that.
There's definitely a dynamic movement from the hip to do that position, to get into that position. Absolutely, I get that bit, but it's have I found the time taken to do that and the nature. So, for instance, I'm not going to name his name, but I have an athlete who is extremely good at that. Right, extremely good. Right. Is not the fastest in my group by a long shot, right? He's the strongest in the clean, right? Because he can Olympic clean. And obviously this is by no way kind of, therefore that's the rule for everyone. It's just no benefit. You haven't seen the actual real benefit of going, okay, cool. Right, we want triple extension, or that's the whole point of that movement, right? It's that triple, it's not, well, slight triple extension, not getting extension of the hip too much to through step, but it's am I getting enough extension of the hip, the knee, and the ankle? And that's, again, talk about the reductionist type stuff. Right? What gets me that? That's all I'm trying to get when we talk about cleans to some degree. Is am I getting that expression of a vertical force up, or even sometimes, right? And the problem, to some degree, when people do the hip punch, I'll just call it that, right, is that becomes a horizontal movement. I know it sounds kind of silly, right? But I'm deliberately forcing my hips forward to hit the bar, and therefore cause a slight arc of the bar so I can get under it and catch. Now, again, there's nothing wrong with that because you're teaching the hips to go forward over the stance position. Not terrible. But to develop that skill is just, it just takes a little bit too long. And the benefit of it, like I said, the guy who I asked who can do that, he is probably, and I kid you not, he's probably about a third stronger in that position than any of my other athletes, like ever. He's so good at it, but it's because he can clap that bar really, really well and get it moving. But it just doesn't transfer, or it transfers less. And we put the I can't remember the name of the actual machine now. We put the the stats on there to see how much power is being generated, and the power is, muscle lab. But the stats show superb. The output is high, right? It's very, very high. But he's actually our strongest athlete. He's not our powerfulest athlete, right? And then when we go on to other stuff and we go, okay, how far can you do a standing long jump? What's your vertical jump? What's your, I don't want to go on track stats, but 0 to 10, he's not the most powerful, but he is physically the strongest athlete and the best at an Olympic clean, doing Olympic methodology clean. And so, yeah, I just never have seen the personal benefit of it. It doesn't mean it doesn't work, and for some it works perfectly fine. Personally, I'm like, it's going to take too long to kind of get correct properly. And then, do I see enough crossover from it for it to be worth that benefit? Not really.
I have this reminded me of something. So, as Jonathan Edwards, arguably one of the greatest British track and field athlete ever,
Yep.
the goat of the triple jump, right? One of the goats of the horizontal jumps. Do you believe that? Have you heard that he after 1994, the only lift he really did was a power clean. Right? He just stopped squatting. What do you think of making an Olympic lift just your main movement, just one, like getting at a certain, like let's say you get 1.5 times body weight of a power clean, and that's what you do for your strength and power stimulus only?
I love folklore, right? It kind of throws back to the Ben Johnson only did 5 times 300 kilogram bench press or whatever. It's like, it's those things of mythology to some degree. Now, don't get me wrong. Yeah, I think doing a single lift and choosing a single lift, it's what works for you, right? I think the problem with it, I think with Jonathan, was that obviously he would get injured quite a bit as well, because his event is what I think it's 17 steps. It was 17 steps and then 3 jumps, right? Again, if you break down to the reductionist part of it and go, right, for your event, what can you get? What is it you really, really need, right? We I can't really say what I was going to say then. We have squads in the UK that have moved. I'm talking about jump squads here, that have moved so far away from their event when they some of their training sessions. It's mental. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, but they're so far away. It's crazy. Mm-hmm. Jonathan got specific, right? So there's an element there that if you think around those standards, if you look back at it and go, could you even argue it's very Bondarchuk, right? It's very much, okay, you will jump and you will do this and that's it. I look sometimes at short sprints, and I do consider the exact same way. For the throws events, it's very similar, right? So for shot put and discus, might follow a Bondarchuk kind of programming, right? They'll do, I can't remember the exact terminology, but let's say microcycle. They'll do a 2-week microcycle of exactly the same exercises day in, day out, same amount of throws, until it doesn't improve anymore. Then they'll take a rest and then come back to it. Now, I've considered playing around with that in the short sprints, right? Because the nearest event you can get to that is a short sprint event. right? Is reduce all the variables as much as possible and go, what is it you actually need to do? Now, and there's an element of being very similar to that. Okay, what do we need in the gym? What is your force expression? What's the minimum amount of cardio we can get away with? What's the minimum amount of this you can get away with? And then just repeat, and then you don't improve. Cool, come back out, change, go into a different block and come back again. And just revolve around that. Now, I would say that's probably very similar with the triple jump. Is again, his run up was 17 strides, I believe, and then 3 jumps. Okay, condition yourself for 17 strides and 3 jumps. What in reality do you need for that? Lots of acceleration work and lots of power work. So yeah, just doing a hang clean or power clean for whatever he was doing would be just that force expression, very short, very quick, needed. You know, it's those bits to kind of consider and think about what if you were put into that mindset. How does that make sense? And the only way that makes sense to me, if that was the case, would be, yeah, he was following something. Now, obviously, depending on how much they would have been aware of bondage up again, then I feel like bondage up became a bit more prevalent slightly after that. I'm trying to think. But you could get away with saying, okay, on the grand scheme of things, the event is over very, very quick. So how much time does he require to spend on anything else? He obviously did. If you look at his physicality, the guy was, you know, ripped. Can you get that just from doing cleans? Possibly. Would you say he was doing something else? Absolutely. You know, that could be something else. That could be medicine ball conditioning. It could be circuits, right? We underplay circuit training, right? Body weight stuff. You know, and again, it's the conversation. Did the only thing you did in the gym was X? Cool. What else did you actually really do? You know, to maintain physicality stuff. There's a famous, famous-ish, not actually famous, British 400-meter runner who claimed to never be in the gym really, but he did a 20 to 30 minute bodyweight circuit after every session. Yeah, okay, so there's still physical conditioning that took place, just not quite in the same thing. Again, it comes down to that whole thing of like, what gets you the job without having to do that same thing all the time, right? It's okay. If I want reflexive, I want power expression. I don't want to do it in the gym. What else does it? Okay, medicine balls, plyometrics, or bodyweight circuit. There's always something, and I think that's where the real kind of we said it at the start. I think the art of coaching, the art of training comes into it a little bit. There's so many different ways to get there. It's just understanding how they interplay.
Yeah,
definitely. I mean, and also Jonathan Edwards was one of the greatest athletes in history. I mean, 150 kg power clean. He was. I'm pretty sure he was faster than some of the British sprinters at the time. They like certain distances. Wasn't he faster than what was his name? The sprinter at the time, the best in that same period. I think there was a rumor that apparently Jonathan Edwards would beat him in the first 30 meters of the sprint, or something along those lines.
Who knows?
I don't remember who it was. Yeah, something along those lines. But yeah, as you were gonna say, Nigel?
Yeah, I was gonna man, what was I gonna say? I lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, so with I want to touch back on that. What was the hang clean split you said?
Yeah.
And you said you get you get like an eccentric loading out of that a little bit. Was that part of it?
Yeah. So it's a reflexive exercise. Yeah. So essentially, a fast eccentric creates more force than pretty much anything else, right?
Yeah.
So so again, it's like what you spend in time doing, and I want my athletes to develop power, strength, speed, and hit that fast twitch, right? So I'm going to use a generic fast twitch term. And reflexives hit fast twitch a lot more than anything else, right? But obviously we're in an acceleration dominant, not acceleration dominant sport to some degree, but so concentric force is absolutely required. So a hang clean helps me do the concentric part, but then the catch in a reflexive split. So it's almost you're catching quite low down, right? You're going into a split, one knee forward, one leg back type scenario, but you're catching it at the bottom. You're not catching it at the top. You know, like in a normal clean and jerk, for instance, when they jerk, the catch is usually quite high, right? The legs aren't that separate. They're separate, but not massively. I think some athletes will catch it real far apart, but generically, it's not always that big of a split. For me, it's a split. It's a split, right? If you were to, just do a lunge on the floor, to some degree, and you've almost got your front knee almost a 90-degree angle. It's not going to be, it's like 110. That's where I want you to catch it. So you're really snapping under that bar, driving one leg forward, one leg back, and catching yourself low. And that catch in that eccentric position loads the tissue in that really fast eccentric position. And puts a really good load through. I must admit, I have found some good speed development doing reflexive stuff like that. And that's one of the best reflexive exercises I've actually come across. And people do slightly different things, like I said, I mentioned before, like you can do put the bar onto your shoulders or your chest and just drop into a seated, squat position, reflexive, and that works as well. And same thing for bench press, but don't do a bench, that can hurt.
Okay.
But we do it as a circuit, in all honesty. We do a reflexive circuit, a bodyweight circuit that is purely reflexive. So you'll do, like a Bulgarian stance, for instance, leg behind you, and you're upright, and then you'll drop into a lunge. That front leg has to really pop out in front of you real quick and catch. We'll do press ups, so you just catch, go up and catch yourself at the bottom real quick. We'll do reflexive squats, as I just mentioned, and a few other things as well, just to kind of really work the body in that sense. And I think for me, a reflexive circuit is probably one of the best development exercises that I've added over the past several years.
For sure. So we're running out of time here. So I want to ask you one more thing, just one more thing. So you're obviously pretty active on the sprinting subreddit. Wonderful place
yes.
where you learn about.
I don't know how to show up on there. That's true.
A wonderful place where you get to learn about calf insertions and how good your time is.
Yeah.
I remember you mentioned some books that you were reading, and one of them was DB Hammer, and I think you actually sent me the book through DMs, and you said like you think
really? Okay.
yeah, you said you think his principles should be known. What about DB Hammer kind of stood out to you?
Do you know what? It's a mixture of stuff, in all honesty. Like, I would really, really, really like to know who he really was and things like that. But
yeah,
it's little things like isometrics, right? It's isometric variations and things along those lines, and even energetics. They're just, I think people, when they got the book originally, I think people just like to have secrets, don't they? So they just kept it and didn't want to share it at all. And it's like, no, we can't possibly. No, this information is mine. And then there was a lot of conversations.
It's kind of esoteric, like.
Yeah, exactly, right. It's like, oh, it's my secret and no one else can know it. It's education. It's like, oh, we're in the in crew. And there's definitely a few people who kind of still tie into that quite a lot. But yeah, back in the 90s, it was discussed quite a bit on things like Elite Track and on the Charlie Francis forums and things like that. And then it kind of fell apart from the world. And then it's kind of come in a little bit more recently with like run specific isometrics and Alex Natera and things like that, and little bits that have come in. And I think people need to get access to the book. And I've always said, like, if I have it, right? Anyone wants it.
I know someone put it up on what's it called, Scribed, so like pretty much anybody can get it now. But like,
it's kind of hard to go on it.
I couldn't find it before the last few years, so yeah.
Yeah, is it still up on Scribed?
It should be.
It's a free subscription. It's a subscription. You can't.
I have Scribed because I've robbed loads of stuff off there.
Yes.
Can you send me the thing? Can you send me the book later if you don't mind?
Yeah, no problem at all.
The PDF. Yeah.
There's a few books that are kind of like the same thing, right? It's like the James Smith book as well.
Yeah.
Oh, I have the physical copy.
Yeah. Oh, do you have physical copy? Yeah.
The last one on Amazon actually. The sprinting one. Yeah, last one.
I print them off. I generally have. I look down to my right hand side here in my book cabinet on the book. And I have. So back in 2001, that's how old I am, by the way. I'm older than that. But 2001, I got hold of Charlie Francis training system, right? I was on the Charlie Francis forum back then, and I was like just talking to all the coaches. Even before I was even a coach, I was on all the forums. And I remember an athlete came back from the US, and he's like, "Oh, I've got this book," and he printed off the entire book right? Before you could buy it on Kindle or anything like that, and they started selling themselves out and splitting the book up into about 20 different things. So I printed it off there and then. I remember being in a job back in like 2002 and using their printer secretly at night time to print off all these books. And I have it in a jacket, like a book jacket, down to the right of me, in about 5 different books, 5 different jackets. So yeah, I print off everything. I went through a stage where I print off every single research paper and just have them to store just in case that something goes wrong on the internet. You never know. But yeah, James Smith, I have that printed off, and I have the DB Hammer printed off on my shelves because I'm someone who likes to look at it. I want to read it and look and go back to it.
Exactly. I think they're great books. I think there's probably someone out there that has the original copy of the. There's probably a copy of like Charlie Francis' book, or even the D.B. Hammer one, and you just can't find those anymore. Those are gems, definitely. And I think honestly, they probably wouldn't sell for much, but they're definitely really.
They would because there's idiots like us who will fight for it on eBay.
Yeah,
no, that's true. Yeah, I guess so. You're right. Yeah.
That is why, because we would not let that go to someone else. Because again, it's got to be mine, my precious.
Yeah, by my precious.
It's definitely that way.
Hey, go ahead. Sorry, you gonna say one thing?
No, I was just saying. I think trying to find as much information as you possibly can, and things like the DB Hammer stuff, the James Smith stuff, all the things like that. Just get out there.
Food for thought.
Find them because again, you don't have to agree, and I think that's sometimes the issue. I don't agree with that book. It's rubbish. No, it's not rubbish. Just don't agree with it.
And it will make you more well-rounded. Like it's another arrow in the quiver, right? So
it's exactly that. You got to, I think anything that makes you think. Again, this is what I mentioned before about the trying different methodologies, right? It's consider the methodology as to why you would use it. Force yourself to think about it, because it just makes you understand. Because then it stops that whole argument of no, it's only this way or that way.
That goes nowhere.
And it's like no, there's every single way. I think people need to understand something a bit more clearly. I mean, but I think they're definitely definitely good stuff, and people should just read them. And if you want to take one item away from someone's book or someone's article or someone's lecture, it's one new thing you've learned, right? And that's all you need to ever think about. And then you might not use it, or you might use it and you go, or when you see someone else do something, you go, okay, I understand why they're doing that.
Yeah,
for sure.
Anyways,
that's a good place to end right there.
Good place to end. Thank you very much, Stu, for everything, all the answers. And thank you very much, everyone, for watching, and I hope you will have a wonderful day. See you. Bye.